Hello, friend, and welcome to another episode of Artworks for Teachers. I'm your host, Susan Riley, and today my special guest is Holly Stuart. Now, Holly was a former science teacher. She's worked at the elementary level and the middle school level, and has since left the classroom to work for a company called Foldscope. Now, I think you're going to be so amazed, as I was, when she starts describing all of the things that a foldscope can do. A foldscope is actually a paper microscope that is really phenomenal. She's going to share so many details about it, but when you see it, especially if you're not watching, you're listening, go back and watch the video because she is going to show you what one of these things look like. Literally, it's paper. You can take it apart, open it up, take it out into the field. You can stick it onto your phone in order to capture images and use it like a real microscope. So Holly's going to share the background of what a foldscope is, how you can use it in your classroom, and even more importantly, how you can get a classroom set for under 40 bucks. I mean, amazing. Like 25 full microscopes for under 40 bucks that really work. Are you kidding me? So this is an amazing episode because not only is she going to share the Foldscope product, she's also going to talk about how to integrate science and the arts. And one thing that's really important to know about Holly before we begin is that she is an arts integration certification candidate right now. She's going through our certification program. And what she shared with me at the end of the episode after we stopped recording was how much certification has impacted the things that she's now creating for educators to support their work with science and art and integration in classrooms. So I'm really excited for you to hear from our certification candidate, Holly Stuart, all about foldscopes and how we can bring STEAM to life in your classroom. Here we go. Well, hi, Holly. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, good morning, and it's really good to see you, and thank you for having me on.
Of course, of course. So, for people who may not be familiar with you, how about you share a little bit about yourself, your background, and your work?
Absolutely. So I have one of those like windy roads that describes my my
Which is
my
awesome. I
career.
love those stories.
Yeah, yeah. So my background is, well, first of all, my name's Holly Stewart, and my background is in chemistry. So I went to school and I studied chemistry, worked in industry for a while. And then I took a break to do that super important job of raising children. And when I decided to go back into the workforce, I was fortunate enough to be able to say, okay, do I want to go back to the same thing? Or do I want to try something a little bit different? And after the experience of being able to be at home with my children and, getting to be very familiar with the educational system as they were progressing through it, that's what really started to speak to me and, kind of pull at my heart. So I found a way to be able to go into the educational world. And I started off doing informal science education. So everything was science based, because that's, with my background. So I did informal education in meaning that I was the person that schools would bring their classes to for field trips. And we would be, outdoors, walking through the woods, doing, looking at what's in the river and things like that. So teaching science through those experiential type environments. And then through some connections that I had made after doing that for a while, I transitioned into a classroom, so the more formal educational setting. I taught in an elementary school for a while. And it was a lot of fun because the way that I kind of came into it, I was part of the related arts schedule or, the rotation, I guess you could say. So they would, students would go and they'd have their art class one day, music class another day, PE, and then one of those days was science. And so they knew that when they came to me, it was going to be messy. They were going to be doing something, so much fun. We had a great time doing that. And I was able to really help out the science teachers in the elementary school because a lot of times there's a bit of that, that nervousness or that, that tendency to say, oh, I don't really know science, because a lot of the focus truly is on the ELA and the math standards. And so, I was a big support to the teachers. They would tell me, these are the lessons we're supposed to be covering. Can you come up with a lab that the students can do when they're with you? And so it was a great experience. And then from there, I moved up to middle school, and that's where I found like that was so much fun. And it's so funny because people, I mean, and I'm sure you've heard this, people say middle school, and you get one of two reactions. You either
Yep.
get that like fear, like, oh, you couldn't pay me enough to work in a middle school,
That's right.
to the others who were like me, who were just like, oh my gosh, but middle schoolers were so much fun.
And
So,
we need everybody who feels that way to be in middle school. Like we
yes.
just need that.
Yeah, so I was able to teach eighth grade science, and that's where I spent most of my time in the educational setting was in eighth grade science, and I loved it, had a great time with it. I made it through the COVID craziness too, yeah, which
Right?
is
That's amazing.
oh yeah, yeah. And then from there, I made a transition to where I am now, which is with Foldscope Instruments, where I am the education specialist. And what that means is I'm creating resources for everyone. So, not just resources for teachers, not just resources for kids, but for truly anyone who wants to learn about what can I see with a microscope? What's really out there and how do I use it? So I'm trying to create resources that help people to, help take away that intimidation factor that people feel with science, that it's complicated, it's technical, it's too hard for me, and just make it fun and accessible for everyone.
Which is awesome. So I'm curious, what led to your decision to leave the classroom?
So there were a lot of factors involved, and of course, like I said, I made it through the COVID craziness,
Yeah.
but I started just feeling like there needed to be more, and I felt that I was making an impact on the students that I had in my classroom, but I started thinking about what's something bigger that I can do. And honestly, the way that found, I got very lucky with moving into this position that I'm in now. I just started looking at what were the things that I was using as a scientist
Yeah.
that I felt could be really beneficial in a classroom, because I didn't want to leave the educational world. I
Right.
still, very much love science and very much love teaching it and seeing those aha moments
Right.
in people, on people's faces when they're like, oh, wow, that's so cool, those kinds of things. So I didn't want to leave that, but I wanted to find a different way to be able to make that impact in the science education world. And so that's how I just started, like I said, thinking, what are some things that I have that I use? And I reached out to Foldscope and said, I would love to be able to help you guys develop content and resources for people to use your product and get it in the hands of more people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love that because so many teachers, they love education, but for a variety of reasons, sometimes they're burnout, but for a lot of teachers, it's more about when they're leaving specifically the classroom. It's more about how do I make a bigger impact overall, right? And I love that that's a part of your story. It's certainly a part of mine. It's difficult to leave your kiddos and to leave a
Yeah.
school building, but you can do it a little easier, I think, when you know that I can have a bigger impact and a wider range of support when I can have a platform like you do with Foldscope. So tell us a little bit about Foldscope. What is it? How did it start? Give us a little bit of details.
Yeah, absolutely. So Foldscope Instruments is a company that started in 2015. But, even though that's when the company started, its origin story is a few years earlier than that. So there is a professor, and he's still at Stanford, a professor at Stanford whose name is Manu Prakash. He's someone that a lot of people have heard him speak before. He gave a TED talk actually about the Foldscope product, and just work that he's done. But his background and his true area of interest that he works with is with what's called frugal science.
Okay.
So one of the things that is kind of a barrier to people, pursuing scientific careers or even learning about it in school is the price of the technology and the equipment that's used.
Yeah.
A lot of science equipment is extremely expensive, very technical and everything like that. So it's not something you would normally picture just handing out to a bunch of kids in your classroom and saying, go use this. And so frugal science is really like where his lens that he looks at a lot of issues in the world through. He was doing some field work in remote locations, overseas and things like that. And a lot of the work that he does requires the use of a microscope. But what he was encountering in these, when he was doing field work in these remote locations, is a lack of resources. And those resources could be the microscopes themselves, or even access to, if you have, electricity back in the lab, if you're out in the field, you don't necessarily have a place to plug something in. So just being able to think about ways that how can I get a microscope out here to use it where it's truly needed and the information, we need it in real time. So he came back after doing a few of these trips, he came back to his research group and he said, okay, here's what we need to do. There's a huge problem, because he was seeing it in the locations that he was in. And he's imagining, if you scale this up to, worldwide and thinking globally, this is a huge issue that we're facing. So he came back to his research group and he said, okay, we are going to come up with a microscope that is portable, that is durable, that doesn't require any extra, anything that you need to plug it in or anything like that. It can be used just on its own while you're out in the field. And the clincher for him was, he said, and it has to cost less than $1 to produce it.
Wow.
Now we're talking microscopes are, hundreds, some of them can be thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And this was what he charged his group with. And they went to, they came up with all kinds of design ideas. And I could just imagine being in those rooms where, like the creative design process and everything like that. And basically they threw away all the ideas of what a traditional microscope should look like. And they came up with something that they made out of paper. And I have it here. This is the original Foldscope that they designed. So it is truly, you can see I'm bending it here for those who are just listening. It's made of paper and it's got magnets to kind of clip things into place.
Yeah.
But it is truly a microscope it's a high quality one too. So it can actually magnify what you're looking at up to 140 times.
Wow.
So, and the resolution is also really good, because you can get a resolution of just under 2 microns. So you can actually see a single-celled bacteria with just this piece of paper and a lens.
That's
and some magnets.
amazing, Holly.
Yes.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Why does all schools not have one of these? Like at least one. Holy cow, Hannah.
That is a great question, Susan. This is truly, when we think about, when we're talking about, what kind of resources do we need to create and all that kind of stuff, it truly is so that we can get one of these in the pockets of every student everywhere around the world. We want it to be something that's as commonplace as, in a classroom as a pencil.
So what's the retail price on one of them?
So what we do, these are sold. So we have classroom sets.
Yeah.
So a classroom set of the original Foldscope is $35 for 20 microscopes.
Oh my gosh. Like every school has that. Every school has that.
$35 will get you 20 of these. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, it's amazing.
It really, and it was, so the original project was, wanting to create these, finding a way to make these. Once they started making them, what they did, which I think is just genius, what they did was they said, you know what, we need to be able to, make sure that this is something that can truly work, that it resonates with people. And so they would send them out to people and ask them to say, okay, what we want is for you to use this. No, like prescribed, here's how you have to use it.
Right.
Use this and then let us know what you did with it. And we have a platform called the Microcosmos, where people who have Foldscopes will send, they'll post the pictures that they've taken, observations, reflections, things like that, on how they used their Foldscope. And the results of what people did went above and beyond anything that we could have possibly imagined for, using a microscope. We had people that were, testing for biodiversity in soil samples in the Amazon, people who were looking at bacteria and water quality in remote areas. And then I remember this one little girl who was she wanted to see what ice cream looked like underneath her Foldscope. So through a bunch of trial and error, they ended up, I think what they ended up having to do was she and her mom, they were like, because they were trying to look at it, but of course it was melting. But then they realized we can just stick this in the freezer, so they just stuck the whole microscope in the freezer with the
Wow.
sample in it, and they were able to see it. So just the creativity and the, what you can do with it, it truly is limitless.
It is like I'm just in awe of this right now because I'm thinking about all the ways that artistically you could use it as well. It's that's incredible. And as a daughter of a chemist, like
Okay.
that, I'm just blown away.
Mhm.
So talk to me a little bit more about your philosophy and then maybe the company's philosophy around science and arts integration in specific, and then maybe some examples of how Foldscope could support those kinds of connections.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that for me, when I was in the classroom, honestly, my perspective was that we need to get rid of those educational silos.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be math is taught here, English is here, math,
Right.
it's all integrated together.
Yes.
So I was very fortunate a couple of my years, because with middle school they rotate out, teachers and things like that. But I had a couple of years with teams that we all had that same philosophy, and we would work together to come up with those projects that, it was like we would do a part of it in my class, and then another part in the social studies, another part in the math, another part in the ELA, and then it would kind of all come together. And it was so funny because the kids were like, wait a minute, we were just talking about this with Mrs. So and so, and wait, what, this was supposed to be something we're doing in math. And I'm like, no, it's all together. So I really feel that the content areas go together naturally. And I think that the arts is a really important part of it, because it's one thing to have all the information and all the data and all the knowledge, but the way that you present it,
Mm,
it takes the artistic lens through which you can think about the content. It really can make a difference in how it's received by your audience.
agreed.
And I have learned a lot through the arts integration certification process.
Mhm.
And I've learned that what I was doing was it was a little higher level than what we would call the arts and crafts kind of a thing, because I was bringing the arts into my classroom, but there wasn't an assessment for the arts part of it.
Yeah.
But it was definitely a huge influence on the work that I was doing.
Mhm.
And I found that my students, when they were able to, when they knew that their final assessment, their final project was not going to be a multiple choice test,
Right.
that I just told them, I want you to think of how, what are some things that you're interested in?
Yes.
How does that relate to the content? And then how can you mesh those two together to show me what you know?
Yeah.
And when they had the freedom to be able to do that, I mean, everyone in the school knew when Mrs. Stewart had end of the unit assessments, because people were bringing in stuff that was just way above and beyond. I had, giant canvas paintings that people would make. I had, the digital arts. I had a student who was very into Minecraft, and he created his whole entire project in a Minecraft world, to show me what, I mean, it was amazing what kids could do. And so just seeing the power of the arts applied in just a science classroom
Mhm.
was huge for me. So I I can only imagine in other content areas the same kind of impact that could have.
Absolutely.
So I definitely feel that arts and science go together. And then I'm bringing that into the work that I'm doing with Foldscope as well, because I write blogs for Foldscope. One is called Foldscope Explores, and one is called Foldscope in the Classroom.
Mhm.
And with both of those, what I'm doing is just kind of finding things that are out there and then presenting it in a way that makes people say, "Oh my gosh, that is so beautiful." And drawing them in through those, getting those emotional ties to the images that you see.
Yes.
And it does take an understanding of the arts and how you would present it.
Mhm.
So I am definitely doing that through that kind of a lens. In the Foldscope in the Classroom blog specifically, I have a section, I give a science activity that you can do. And then at the end, I do give those ideas for how you can integrate this into other content areas.
Mhm.
So it's definitely something that Foldscope is moving forward with. trying to bring in those artistic elements. And that is one of the things I know that we were going to be talking about it with the newest project that I'm working on with Foldscope is definitely having more of an artistic influence in it than stuff that I've done in the past.
Yeah, and I'm thinking like just as an example of like looking at microscopy and art, being able to look at the beauty and the symmetry that often happens when you're looking at something under the microscope. Or we have a lesson called Aboriginal Watershed where you're tracking the water sheds in your personal area. So it's based out of an Australian painting, but it uses that as a prompt for students to look at their own watershed. And I'm thinking with the amazing flexibility and cost
Right.
effectiveness of something like a foldable or a Foldscope, you can take that right out into your watershed and immediately have them take a look at what's in the water and have that become
Absolutely.
a part of that project. I think that's just a wonderful natural connection of maybe just two lessons that would be super easy to start bringing in some kind of STEAM ideas of integrating the arts. You talked about a new project.
Yes.
I know that this is a new Kickstarter for you guys called the Projection Microscope, right?
Mhm.
So can you
Yes.
share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we started working on basically, we were thinking about the reactions that people have when they're looking at something in a Foldscope. And first thing that they do, they're looking at it and they're like, oh, wow. And the first thing they want to do is share it with somebody else.
Yes.
It's always, look at this. And then people are trading and everybody's looking at everybody else's samples. And it's a great thing. And we do have, to be able to share your images, we do have one of the things that it does is, again, some of the parts are magnets. So that is magnetic there. And we have a thing that you can attach to your phone. It's just another magnet. So you can actually hook your phone onto it so
Awesome.
you can take pictures and record video. So that is one way that people were sharing what they saw. But as you know, we do have, there's a lot of classrooms in there, and I'm not going to go into this whole area, but technology in the classroom, people saying you are allowed to have phones, you're not allowed to have phones. So if there's classrooms that don't have the ability to use a phone with their Foldscope to be able to share stuff, we were thinking, how could we get them to be able to still have that collaborative experience, but have it be more immediate? And we started thinking about projection. And so we came up with the idea of having a dedicated microscope that is a projector. So it's a projection microscope.
Mm.
I don't have the latest, we're still in development of it, but I have like an early iteration of it. But it is basically, it's a microscope that the light comes out of here. And so you can actually project whatever sample you have collected.
Oh, cool.
So, and it's an absolutely amazing feature, and I've tested it in a few classrooms, and it has been amazing to see how the teacher's response to it,
Mhm.
because you can imagine if you're trying to assess your students on whether or not they're seeing what you want them to see. If they're like, oh yeah, I see it, and then the teacher will go and look, and it's not even on the right part of the sample. So this is a quick and easy way for now teachers can quickly assess, okay, go ahead, put your slide in the projection microscope, project it out there. Now show me what the different parts of the cell are.
Yeah.
Or, show me the different things that you're seeing in this sample, and the students would be able to very clearly go and point to it. And the teacher knows, did they see it or did they not?
Right.
And also before setting the class loose to use their Foldscopes on their own, the teacher can use that projection microscope to project an image of, now this is what we're looking for in your samples. So I want you to be able to, they're going to have to prepare their own slides, and everyone will be able to do it. You don't have to share one microscope in the whole entire class. So you can have your students prepare their slides with that prior knowledge now of what it is that they're supposed to be seeing, and they know if they've got it or not.
Exactly.
So so we're really excited about this new project. And then there are, of course, those ties to the arts are going to be in here as well. If you want me to expand on that,
Absolutely,
yeah.
please. Yes.
So one of the things that we also noticed was when people want to draw what they see,
Mm.
in the same way that with science, people, oh, I can't do science, it's too hard. People have that same response with art.
Yes.
I can't draw. I can't draw this or anything. Even if you're telling them just a basic structure, just go ahead and replicate it on your paper. There is that intimidation factor. But with a projection microscope, now you've got that projected image, you can actually trace it. And then you know that the model that your students are creating based on whatever sample it is that they're looking at, you know that if they're drawing a cell and they're drawing the nucleus within the cell, drawing the cell walls and all that, everything is to scale on their model that they've recreated. So they know that there are certain structures that are bigger than others. They're able to label them properly. And so just thinking of how that can help with, improving their artistic abilities as they get more comfortable with seeing it and tracing it, then they can start doing it on their own, and then they can, develop on from there. And there's so many different the different elements of art, thinking in terms of line, form, shape, texture, all of those types of things. It's truly amazing how those come to life when you're looking at these specimens underneath the microscope, because there are so many things that look like they're just flat and two-dimensional, but all of a sudden you put it in a microscope and you're like, there are so many levels of depth that are within that sample, that when you're, drawing it or even describing it, think about the vocabulary that enhancement that can come from this, that, students are now getting more, it's more of a connection, I think, with the actual content than just looking at a picture in a textbook.
Oh, yeah. And I think also the observation skills that have to
Yes.
happen and occur with looking at anything in particular. But if you're taking a look at something, a sample under a microscope, right there is an opportunity to use some visual thinking skills like see, think, wonder, or think, puzzle, explore, or any of the ways that we can expand and extend a student's ability to observe, take their time, and describe
Yes.
in detail what they're seeing, as well as prompt them in either further curiosity, right, of why is it like that, what,
Yeah.
like, and it spurs them on to the next step, right, which I think is super important, because that's where we need them to be, right.
Yes. Yeah, you don't want them to just, okay, I've looked at this one thing and now I'm done. Are all leaves like this? Is it just this plant? Is it just this plant on the bottom? Is it the leaves on the top of it? I mean, there's so many different ways that you can go. Yeah.
Absolutely. So now, when is the projection microscope slated to maybe be available?
Yeah, so fingers crossed. The Kickstarter should be launching. I'm guessing right now we're saying sometime in August.
Okay.
So probably the end of the summer. But obviously you can, going onto our website, sign up for our newsletter. That'll keep you updated, so when to join in and start supporting us and getting these, Foldscopes and the projection microscope into classrooms.
Perfect. So before we close, there's a question I always love to ask our guests, and I always get a different answer, which I think is so amazing. It kind of speaks to the question itself. From your experience, how can creativity impact education today?
I love this question, because creativity it's a huge part of, people a lot of times associate it with art, but it's a huge part of science. Like we were just talking about the questions that can be generated from just one observation of one specimen on a slide. But I think that truly creativity helps to remove those barriers, the barriers to access of science education, because a lot of times people don't see themselves as scientists because, the lack of the resources, they've never had a chance to actually use the materials before. But if you are able to present the information to people in a way that is different from, the norm, and you can just kind of tell them that this is just like you were saying, a jumping off point, that this is a resource that you can use to pursue something that's interesting to you, because these are things kids can take them home. They don't have to, and they shouldn't stay just in a classroom, because this truly is something you can use inside, outside, at home, wherever you happen to be. I take mine with me any family vacations. Everybody knows, Mom or Aunt Holly is going to have at least one with her. But I think that truly getting people to have an opportunity to use a scientific tool, it helps them to be, then they start thinking and they have those questions and wanting to try out new things. And that gets them interested and engaged in a way that isn't, I'm trying to think of the right word, in a way that isn't intimidating, I think is really the big part of it, and they can get the fear out of the equation, and just start fearlessly exploring their world. And then they can see themselves as scientists. And for a lot of human history, scientists were only a particular type of person. And now we're seeing that everyone, truly everyone, is a scientist. And the more people we can get thinking that way and genuinely internalizing that message, I think the better off we're going to be, because representation really does matter. And we're able to get a lot more people to the table, to have scientific discussions now with these tools. So that's how I think it's going to help impact education.
I love it. I think that's amazing. And I think you're right on. You're right on. Where can people learn more about Foldscope and you and stay in touch?
Absolutely. So, and we really do, and I know that a lot of times people say this, it's lip service, but I really do want people to reach out, whether it's to me or to the company, to find out about our products and what we can offer and our resources. But we have, our website is foldscope.com. That's kind of like the hub where you can find everything, all of our resources, tutorials, our store, our videos, all that kind of stuff. The blogs are all on the website. And then we do have, and on the website is a link to that microcosmos page that I was telling you about, that people, I mean, from all over the world, if you do nothing else, go to that microcosmos website and look at the things that people are finding and seeing and sharing. It truly is absolutely amazing. But that link is there too, but it is microcosmos.foldscope.com is if you wanted to go directly to the website. We are on all social medias. We are, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all of those, we're there. And if you want to reach out to me directly, I'm Holly at foldscope.com. So that's my email, or you can follow me and look at the things that I post on social media. I'm at Holly A. Stewart. So,
Great.
and I can make sure that you have all those,
Yep.
if you put them in the show notes and things like
Yep,
that. So.
we will absolutely do that. All of those links and everything will be in the show notes so that people can easily access them later on. Thank you so much, Holly. This has been such an enlightening episode. I'm so excited. My wheels are already spinning about how this can be used in classrooms and with arts integration and STEAM. I thank you so much for sharing this with our audience. And I'm really hoping that many of them take you up on getting those classroom packs, because it's so accessible for everyone, and it's something that we can definitely use more of in schools. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm hoping that my inbox will be filled up with people wanting to talk to me about it and ask about it and, get training on them and everything. I'm
Me
happy
too.
to talk to people about it.
Me too. All right. Thank you so much, Holly.
Thanks, Susan.